This is the Infinite Moment Podcast, where we discuss topics that focus on stress relief solutions. Welcome to another episode of the Infinite Moment Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about how to minimize your stress levels when adapting to change. If there's one consistent thing in life, that thing is change. There will always be something in our lives that's going to be different from what we've experienced previously. And sometimes those things can cause anxiety or levels of stress that can be difficult to manage or can lead us into states where we really don't want to be if we're not managing that stress properly. So today we're going to take an in-depth look into some tips on how to keep those stress levels in check, how to properly manage them so that when we are going through these periods of change, whether they're simple periods of change or more severe states of change, we can properly respond so that that change is not only effective but doesn't cause us extra stress and anxiety within our lives. All right, so we got an article queued up that we're going to take a look at. And we also got another article about an NBA star who had to basically focus on what challenges and what changes he would have to overcome in order to continue to be effective in the league that he plays in. Now, a couple things to keep in mind as we're going through this topic. Everyone responds to change in different ways. Some stressor that you may find really stressful, someone else may find a lot less stressful, and vice versa. But with these tips, we'll have a great place to start. And with the story of the athlete, we'll kind of see how to accept the challenge and then get in the right frame of mind to make the necessary changes that you need to make. All right, so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the first article. This article comes from Psychology Today, and it's by Ann Smith. 10 tips for easing the stress of transition and change. Change is challenging, but we can always choose how to handle the transition. Some changes in life are forced on us. Aging is one. Other changes are the result of choices we make to better our lives or accomplish goals we have set. Either way, change is challenging, and we always have a choice about how we will handle the transition. A few years ago, my parents decided to move from the ranch home they had lived in for 20 years in Florida to a smaller home in a senior community nearby where they would have fewer responsibilities and enjoy company of their peers. Although they knew it was necessary, my father's anxiety began to increase as they faced the challenge of downsizing and letting go of the role of patriarch and homeowner. The move was very difficult for him because marching into the unknown made him feel vulnerable after having the illusion of control for most of his life. He felt old, irrelevant, and feared that this would be the beginning of the end of his life. His anxiety appeared to his family as irritability, stubbornness, and rigidity because we were not used to seeing him vulnerable. As often is the case within a very short time in their new home, my father became the social and gregarious person he had always been, making the new community his next project in life by starting an annual variety show where he was able to use his leadership skills and his musical abilities to bring joy to my mother and to an entire community. Now that I'm in a similar situation of downsizing my life, I'm using my father's reaction as something I can learn from and perhaps offer solutions to others who will at some point face difficult transitions in life. Marriage, divorce, breakups, career changes, illness, having children, having an empty nest, financial downturns, moving to a new home or a smaller home, graduating, losing someone you love are all among the most common transitions for human beings. Tips for easing the stress of transitions. Admit that you feel vulnerable, which may include fear, anxiety, or sadness, along with excited anticipation. Become proactive in the change process. Those who are empowered look for opportunities to make things better. Victims sit back and worry about what will happen from a passive perspective. Know that feelings are not set and you are never stuck with just one feeling. In the same day, we may feel afraid and optimistic and excited about the same circumstances. Focus on the positive emotions. Trust yourself based on small or large successes in your past. Ask yourself, when I have managed change before, how did I do that? How did it turn out? Try to avoid obsessing about the future. The solutions for how you feel now are usually in the present. In my case, I am literally waiting right now to hear from a potential buyer for my house. Instead of trying to push my anxious thoughts into the background, I decided to write this blog. When it seems that your future is dependent on the actions of someone else, you might be inclined to obsess on what ifs. A better alternative is to choose to be where you are. Make the moment you are in the most important thing in your mind. Take positive action to get back on track. Stopping certain thoughts isn't easy without a few tools. Doing something totally different, like putting on music and dancing in your kitchen, going for a walk in nature, drinking a big glass of water, opening up your posture, stand and stretch your arms stretched out to each side, and breathing. You can also read something short and inspirational that will steer you in a better direction. Sometimes our minds feel like a runaway train. If you can quiet your mind briefly, you will notice there is always a fork in the road. One option is to let your anxious thoughts hijack your brain, the negative path, or you can find something to be grateful for, or you can believe that things have a way of working themselves out, the positive path, and choose the positive thoughts. Asking for help when you are vulnerable works much better than being angry, irritable, and critical, which pushes people away. Be aware that you may be spreading negative energy to others when you are fearful and obsessed. Many people can lessen their fears and stress fairly quickly with meditation, prayer, or by helping someone else. In other words, get out of your own head. If you try these tips consistently, you will probably have an easier but not perfect transition. Ongoing fear and distress may be a sign that you may need professional help. For a small number of people, depression can be triggered by stress and will prevent them from bouncing back when things settle down. Anxiety may also make it harder to move on and accept changes. Although change is good for us, no one change is going to fix everything. In uncertain times, we often think we know what is best and can see only one acceptable outcome. However, if you seek and hope for the highest good, meaning the best outcome for all concerned, rather than the one acceptable outcome, you may be surprised with something better. The best outcome may not be what you expected, but in the end, it may bring about positive results and options you never expected or considered. All right, one of the things that grabbed my attention right away from that article was how it pointed out that some changes are optional, while other changes in our life do not appear as something that we may be choosing. And obviously, if you're not choosing for this change to take place, that can be a more stressful situation. So, as we've discussed in previous episodes, some of the most common stressors are marriage, divorce, breakups, career changes, sickness or illness, having children, financial, and moving to a new home, graduating, or losing someone you love. And a lot of these, they may cause distress, which is like bad stress, or eustress, which is good stress. Meaning it's still stressful, but there's a good outcome from it, or something positive in your mind. All right. And then there was it had about 10 items listed on how to make that transition during change as least stressful as possible. So obviously the first thing is to recognize that there is a stress. Be vulnerable enough to acknowledge that there's a fear, that there's some anxiety that's coming along with the anticipated change or the change that you're currently in. Don't try and just put it out your mind and pretend like it's not something that you're going to have to deal with. Get proactive in the change process. All right? Understand you're going to feel different things. You may be happy, excited, sad. You may be all of these at different times. But acknowledge those emotions and work through them. Trust that you have the ability to navigate the change, and know that you've made changes in your past that you probably thought you wouldn't be able to get through either. But here you are, you did get through them. And what did you learn from that? So just see this as another opportunity to grow from change. Don't feel like you're going to be in complete control. Let go of the control to some extent and understand that the future is not yet written. You can prepare for it, but you can't fully know what it's going to be. So be open that the future can be different than you may have thought it was going to be. Now, it's natural to run scenarios through your mind to try and prepare and think about what if this happens, and what if this, and what if this happens, what if this happens. Now, to the extent that you use those questions to prepare yourself, that's healthy. But if you're just running that as a loop in your mind and not actually answering those questions or, navigating through them, then you're really just kind of creating more psychological damage and stress. You may need to implement certain activities in your life that will help cause or help lead to additional stress relief, such as a workout routine, and a morning or evening walk, or a healthy meal. And mindfulness is always an important one, whether it's through meditation or simply focusing on your present moment and allowing different thoughts to sort themselves out in your mind by slowing down and putting focus towards them. If you need help, ask for it. Any change that you've gone through or may go through in the past, most likely someone else has already gone through it. So there's specialists out there who can help you. Maybe even a friend or a family member who's been through that change, or can at least lend a listening ear so that you can bounce ideas off of them. So those are just some of the tips that you can use when you're trying to navigate stressful situation of impending change or change that you're currently going through. You can use those steps, those tips to hopefully navigate that change with the least amount of stress involved. All right, so next we're going to actually take a look at the example of the athlete who faced change and their process for navigating it. Luka Doncic admits he must show better self-control and keep emotions in check in light of recent rule changes. It's hard, but it's something I have to do. This is an article by Martin Finn, published on October 21st, 2021. Dallas Mavericks star Luka Doncic is a revelatory talent on the basketball court, but the 22-year-old hasn't always kept his emotions in check. Doncic admitted earlier this week that he has to improve his relationship with referees after tying for the NBA lead in technical fouls last season. Dallas Mavericks star Luka Doncic likely understands he might have to take a more tactical approach to his conversations with referees entering the 2021 and 2022 season. The NBA has implemented new foul baiting rules to prevent offensive players from seeking or creating unnecessary contact with defenders. This could well impact Doncic, one of the stars named in a preseason report explaining the motivations for the rule changes. Doncic acknowledged establishing a working relationship with the Zebras will be challenging. However, he accepts it's an area of the game he needs to continue working at as he begins his 2021-22 MVP candidacy. The NBA hopes to cut down on offensive players using non-basketball moves to draw fouls and get to the charity stripe. Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN reported earlier this summer that the NBA had assembled clips of players, including Luka Doncic, making motions deemed unnatural as a means of drawing fouls during a June meeting to discuss potential foul baiting rule changes. The league ultimately adopted the proposed changes, with referees now instructed to swallow their whistles or call offensive fouls depending on the severity of the transgression of offensive players. The rule changes have been warmly received by many, including Golden State Warriors head coach Steve Kerr. However, it's also been clear players are struggling to adjust to the new rules. Stephen Curry and James Harden were among those seemingly perplexed by non-calls during the preseason after getting defenders in the air with up fakes. Stars with an affinity for using a variety of tricks to draw contact and get to the line could go through an adjustment period. This might be especially true for Doncic, who has occasionally let his emotions get the best of him when interacting with referees. Eddie Sefko writes this on X. Luka Doncic on dealing with the referees in preseason, quote, "It's better, but it's only preseason. Now the real deal starts, so we'll see then how it looks. It's hard, but it's something I have to do. It's part of the game. I need to control better, and I think it's getting better." End quote. Luka Doncic's temper got him in quite a bit of trouble last season. The Mavericks star ranked 6th in the NBA in free throw attempts. He got his fair share of calls, but Luka frequently believed he deserved more whistles. Doncic tied with Dwight Howard for the most technical fouls, 16 in the NBA last season, per HoopSite. Interestingly, one such tech came during a game against the Los Angeles Lakers in April, when he made what would now be deemed a non-basketball move. The Slovenian sensation was asked earlier this week what he made of the dynamic with referees thus far and his response to rule changes. Doncic expressed optimism about his relationship with the officials, but admitted he must keep working on his self-control as the regular season begins. Preseason games are one thing, but as Doncic noted, it's a different scenario when the games really matter. Can the 22-year-old exhibit more maturity and stay within himself on the floor? Interestingly, Doncic's first exposure to the new foul baiting rule might come in Dallas' season opener Thursday night against the Atlanta Hawks, another team whose star player served as an example for why the NBA felt obligated to make changes to the rules. Luka Doncic and Trae Young are two of the most exciting young talents in the NBA. They are as skilled and charismatic as any under 25 star in the league, but they've also been slightly controversial. Just as Doncic was implicated in off-season discussions about foul baiting, Young's means of getting to the line arguably drew even more scrutiny. Ice Trae ranked 3rd in the NBA in free throw attempts and took 62 more free throws than the next closest guard, which is Damian Lillard. His tendency to seek contact and draw whistles drew comments from the likes of Steve Nash and Tom Thibodeau last season. How will Luka and Trae adapt to the new rules going forward? Basketball fans might find out right from the jump as the Mavericks and Hawks go at it on Thursday night in Atlanta. Alright, so clearly that was an older article, but nonetheless a really good example for how even at high levels, such as a NBA athlete, you have to be willing to change. And a lot of your success will depend on how well you can manage your stress in moments of change. So obviously Luka realized he was a big part of why the referees wanted to make changes to the rules regarding what they call like foul baiting, or trying to basically use unusual body motions to draw defenders into unnecessary fouls, which would then be advantageous to the team of the person who drew the foul. Understanding that the changes have been made, so now he's playing in a slightly different game. He used his abilities to exploit the current rules at the time, but now that they've changed, the only way to go forward and be successful is to adapt to those changes in the best way he can. And, he had to first accept that he obviously is a big part of the reason of why they implemented these rule changes. So obviously they're going to have a pretty keen eye on him as somebody when they're considering these new rules. But instead of complaining and just saying that he's not going to make a change or he's going to keep trying to get away with what he was able to do before. He's recognizing and he's making the claims that he is going to get better control, and he wants to become better. He understands that the game is hard, but part of what comes with being a professional athlete is having to change to the rules of the game. And if the rules change, then you must change yours as well. So, yeah, really good example. Especially for me, I'm really into basketball, so just looking at it from that perspective meant a lot to me. I just feel like in general, looking at things from a perspective of something at a high level, such as an NBA athlete, is a really good example. It lets us see that change isn't just for people who, maybe in very challenging positions. It's for people who are working to become better at every level, whether that's as a professional athlete, a CEO of a company, a part-time worker at your first job, a student at a new school. It doesn't matter what level it's at. The important thing is to recognize that changes are going to take place, and you must determine how you will navigate that to not only be successful through the change, but also to reduce the level of stress you're going to feel during that time of change. But with that being said, that's going to wrap up this episode of the Infinite Moment Podcast. And until next time, you guys take it easy.